Wendy Williams was once one of the most powerful and influential voices in American entertainment. For years, she commanded the attention of millions of viewers every single day, walking out onto her talk show stage to the roar of a live audience, dropping into her signature chair, and delivering hot topics with a confidence and boldness that made her completely unlike anyone else on television. She was sharp, she was fearless, she was funny, and she was real in a way that audiences responded to with genuine loyalty. Which makes the story of what has happened to her since all the more painful to sit with. Wendy was born in Asbury Park, New Jersey, in July of 1964. She grew up in a family that valued education and hard work, and from an early age she was drawn to communication, to performance, to the idea of having something to say and making sure people heard it. She studied communications in college and then pushed her way into radio broadcasting at a time when that world was not exactly welcoming to a young woman who refused to tone herself down. She was loud and opinionated and willing to go places that other people stepped carefully around, and radio stations did not always know what to do with her. Some of them let her go. She kept moving forward anyway. That persistence paid off in a way that very few careers in media ever do. She became a dominant force in radio, building an audience that was fiercely devoted, tuning in not just for the celebrity news and the music but for Wendy herself, for her personality, for the sense that she was always telling you exactly what she actually thought. Her willingness to say uncomfortable things about famous people earned her critics and loyal supporters in equal measure. And she seemed to operate perfectly well in the heat of both. She did not appear to need everyone to like her. She just needed everyone to listen. The television version of that radio energy arrived with her own daytime talk show, which launched in 2008 and ran for more than a decade. At its peak, the show was a genuine piece of American pop culture. Wendy walked out in her heels and her signature looks and her big personality every morning and connected with an audience that saw in her something refreshingly unfiltered. She could be tough sometimes, and she knew it, and occasionally she reflected on that, but mostly she was honest. And in a television landscape full of carefully managed personalities, that honesty felt like something rare and valuable. But behind the scenes, things were far more complicated and far more painful than the studio lights suggested. Her marriage to her longtime husband, who was also her manager, was troubled in ways that became public knowledge over time. He had a relationship with another woman outside their marriage, a fact that eventually became impossible to keep quiet. And the couple separated in 2019. The end of that marriage was not just the end of a personal relationship but also a major professional disruption, because he had been deeply involved in managing her career for many years. Separating from him meant untangling a great deal all at once. What followed in the years after the separation was deeply concerning to watch. Wendy began to struggle in ways that became visible to her audience and to the general public. She had spoken openly about her personal battles in the past, and she had always done so with a directness that her fans respected. But the difficulties she faced after her marriage ended appeared to grow deeper and more serious. She made public appearances that worried people. There were moments that suggested something more significant was happening beneath the surface. Her health challenges began to stack up in a way that was hard to follow from the outside, but painful to learn about piece by piece. It became known that Wendy had received serious medical diagnoses affecting her memory, her behavior, and her ability to communicate and express herself clearly. For a woman whose entire identity and entire career was built on the power of her words and her voice, the weight of that is almost impossible to put into words. The very thing that made her extraordinary was being taken from her gradually. And that is a particular kind of loss that touches people deeply. Those who had been close to her over the years began to speak publicly about their concerns. There were questions about who was managing her affairs, about whether the people around her truly had her best interests at heart, about whether she was being looked after properly during an incredibly difficult period in her life. Her family expressed concern. People who had worked alongside her expressed concern. And her fans, the millions of people who had grown up watching her every morning, felt a sadness that was quiet and heavy and very real. She had at one point expressed a desire to return to some form of media, to continue being present in the conversation that she had helped shape for so many years. That desire said everything about who Wendy Williams fundamentally is. A person for whom the work and the audience and the connection were not simply a job but a true lifeline. The idea of being separated from that, by illness and by circumstances beyond her control, is heartbreaking in a very specific and very human way. Wendy Williams spent her career looking directly into the camera and telling people the truth as she saw it. She did it when it was uncomfortable. She did it when it cost her relationships and opportunities. She built an entire career on the simple act of being herself, loudly and without apology. The tragedy is not that she had flaws. Every person has flaws. The tragedy is that a woman of such extraordinary energy and presence has found herself in circumstances so far beyond what anyone should have to face, and that the world which once hung on her every word can now only watch from a distance, hoping. She is surrounded by kindness and genuine care. At 61, Wendy Williams deserves peace. She deserves dignity, and she deserves to be remembered not only for her struggles, but for their remarkable, complicated, and truly groundbreaking force of nature. Such she undeniably was and always will be,